We're going to do the quiz review. On your worksheet, before I get started, this value was 3,600, and I want you to change it to 3,000. So reading this, the school fundraiser is often going. The 8th graders are selling cookie dough and hope to raise $3,600. So you'll see that right here on your sheet. The 7th graders are selling popcorn and hope to raise $4,800, which shows up here. And the 6th graders are selling brownie mix and hope to raise $3,000. So the top of the thermometers show the goals. Use the thermometers below to answer questions 1 and 2. You'll use patty paper to mark off even marks. And I'll use my ability to use the smartboard to mark off even marks. So when you do something like this with your patty paper, you're going to mark that off. As you see, if I pick that up, it looks like it marks off twice. So we know that the first thermometer is broken in half. I'm going to write that over here actually. And on this side, I'm going to do half of 3,600. So half of 36 is 18. So half of 3,600 is 1,800. So when I read number 1, it says fill in the blanks with the correct fraction. The 8th graders, the first thermometer is 8th graders. They have reached 1/2 of their goal. When I read problem 2, it says fill in the blanks with the correct amount of money. The 8th graders have raised $1,800. So we're going to continue with that strategy and mark off the 7th graders with the patty paper idea. So you'll have a little piece of patty paper, and I have these little marks. See how many times I can mark these off. So it looks like I could break this one into thirds. So I'll put 1/3 here. It's the 7th graders. The 7th graders have reached a third of their goal. I need to take 48 because the 7th graders make 4,800. If I break it 48 into 3 parts, I get 16. So that means this will be 1,600. So the 7th graders have raised $1,600. For the last one, you're going to make the top part here, that little piece. I'm working on that 3,000 now. So I'm going to do the same thing. Actually make that a brighter color. So okay, so we're going to mark off these. See how many times we can do that. Until we get to the bottom. Yeah, I think it's a little off. Let's see if I can try that one more time. Do that a little bit more careful. So here's where a nice thin pencil comes in. My first yellow mark, I think, was a little thick. I think when I did this with patty paper, and you guys can check it with your patty paper, it turns out to be broken pretty nicely into 6 parts. So each little section is a sixth. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 5 sixths. So the sixth graders have reached 5 sixths of their goal. So we have to take 30 and divide 30 into 6 parts. And that's 5. So 30,000 divided by 6 would be the 5, because 30 into 6 is 5, with the 2 more zeros. So 500. So that little section is 500. So this would be 1,000. This would be 2,000. And this would be 2,500. That requires a little more work. 2,500. So the thermometer problem is very much a summary of Unit 1 in the Bits and Pieces book. Then the next thing we've done in class is practice with ratio tables. So we're going to practice ratio tables here. I'm going to thin out my pen. Okay. To get to the ratio table problem, I want to figure out a way to get from 10 to 2. So I can divide by 5. So if I divide by 5 up there, I have to do the same down here. 20 divided by 5 is 4. So since I can't think of a way to get from 4 to 10, I'm going to remember that I can always skip around in a ratio table. It's pretty easy to get from 20 to 10. To get from 20 to 10, I just divide by 2. So that means I have to, since I started with 20, which is in this column, I have to start with 10 and divide by 2. And I get 5. So remember, you could keep skipping around. For example, I could go from 2 to 6 by multiplying by 3, which means I would have to multiply 4 by 3 and get 12. And then finally, don't forget, you can always add columns. So to get 15, I could either triple this column or add it to this column. 10 plus 5 is 15. So 20 plus 10 is 30. That ratio table's done. Now remember, vertical ratio tables work the same way, but after speaking to you in class, my sense is most people like to have it horizontal. So you can do it both ways. You can rewrite it and put miles on top and hours on the bottom. This is just an option. 10, 20, 40, 60. This is 1.5. So I'm taking 10 and putting it on the top and the 1.5 that goes with it on the bottom. And then you can see that doubling 10 gives me 20. So if I double 1.5, I get 3. Like double $1.50, it's $3. Now I could double again to get from 20 to 40. So I double 3, and I get 6. Doubled. Now I have to get to 60, so I could add columns. 20 plus 40 makes 60, so 3 plus 6 makes 9. Or the other strategy would just be to go 20 times 3, which means you would have to do 3 times 3. 2 ways to get the right answer. fill in the missing values then. Next to the 40, you should have a 6. Next to the 60, you should have a 9. Another use of ratio tables that we learned in class is taking a fraction like 4/5 and making it a percent. To make something a percent, you want the whole to become 100. Remember, you could use a ratio table to do this, but you don't have to use the entire ratio table. But you could, like a lot of 6th graders would double and say 4 out of 5 is the same as 8 out of 10, and then multiply by 10 to get 100. So 4/5 is the same as 80%. All right, moving on a little more. 4 people, read the next problem. There's 4 people, that's why I put a 4 here, share equally 16 ounces of ice cream, that's where the 16 comes in, and 2 giant Rice Krispie treats. You need to use a ratio table to complete the statements below. So look at the statement, each person, that means we need a 1 in the people column. We need 1 with the people column. So each one person is what we're going for. Each one person, and we have to figure out how many ounces of ice cream and how many ounces of Rice Krispie treat, and how many Rice Krispie treats or what fraction of a Rice Krispie treat that they get. So you could divide in half. So if there was 2 people, each one would get 8 ounces and 1 Rice Krispie treat. And then divide in half again, or divide by 2. 1 person, 8 divided by 2 is 4. Remember, when you divide a smaller number by a larger number, you could use a fraction bar. 1 divided by 2 is a half. So now I have the 1 person, so I say 1 person gets 4 ounces of ice cream. So I'm going to change this to a 4. And 1/2 of a Rice Krispie treat. So I'm going to change that to a half. What's that? 5 people share equally a 4-segment chewing worm. So now we're looking at the next problem. So we have 5 people. You have to set the table up yourself, so you're going to put a 5 here. They share equally a 4-segment chewy worm, like this picture here. Use a diagram in the ratio table to complete 3 statements. So there's 4 segments, but there's only 1 worm. So I want to get each 1 person, so I need that unit rate. I need a 1 here. I'm going to zoom in on this table. It's a little small. So when I zoom in, to get from 5 to 1, I have to divide by 5. Which means I have to divide everything by 5 in a ratio table. So the directions said use a diagram and the ratio table below. So I'm starting with the ratio table. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 4 divided by 5 is just 4/5 of a segment. And 1 divided by 5 is 1/5 of a worm. So let's look at the picture and see why that's true. My claim is that each person will get 4/5 of the segment and 1/5 of the worm. So if you had 5 people to share the chewy worm and you only have 4 parts, probably most 6th graders would carefully, very carefully, try to divide this into 5 parts. And then, oops, there we go. Divide each of these into 5 parts. but there's only 4 people. So you could, there's 5 people. Sorry about that, in 4 segments, so you could count off like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a little hard to read that. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you broke that up, the first person, person 1, gets 4 pieces. If you think about that, 4 pieces would be this big. So the first person gets 4 pieces. And the next person gets 4 pieces, and so on and so forth. So in the end, the 5 people each have the same amount, but in comparison to one segment, the segment is this big, they only have, each one person has 4 pieces out of 5 pieces in a segment. So this is 4/5 of the whole segment. So that's where the 4/5 comes from. But it's 1/5 of the whole worm. Because it took 5 equal parts. That's the last problem. So that's why my blanks have 4/5 of a segment and 1/5 of the entire chewy worm. So that's your whole practice quiz.